Here in America, work is in trouble. We've offshored our manufacturing, sent away good jobs, and lost so much ability to make things. American Giant is a company that's pushing back against this tide. They make high-quality clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more, right here in the USA. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, promo code STAPLE20.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to another live stream edition of the John Keim Report. Do me a favor, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube later, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up now about why Terry McLaurin is so excited that maybe quarterback number 11 as a starter since he's been here will be the one that he builds that rapport with for a long time and finally gets to the place where he wants to with the quarterback, why he's so excited. So that's up on ESPN.com now, and I'll probably play it was about a 4-minute interview that I had with him, probably play that later for you guys at some point. Also, you gold members, I'm doing another private Zoom for you on Friday at 6, so whatever you don't get answered today, whatever you don't hear, join me tomorrow at 6 o'clock. During the season, I'm going to start changing those times into a better time. I know Friday at 6 is kind of a tough day and a tough time, so I'm going to change that. And these live streams during the season will be at a different time as well. So just so you know, so I'm appreciating anybody who's joining me now and bringing all your questions. And as you can see, I'm still at the Jets facility. I feel like I'm in this little hostage room. I'm okay. Everybody's okay. I'm not sending signals, but I am. But you can see it's this plain white room. If you're watching, you see it. If you're not with us into it later, then that's what it is. So anyways, let's get to the practice for why you guys are all here. And today, there's a couple things you shouldn't do. Do not overreact to what you hear about practice reports at this point. So I say that because not all of it's going to be very good today, because there are definitely some holes that showed up, things that we had concerns or questions about going into this practice, and you maybe have some deeper questions coming out of this practice. But what you can't do is overreact. It is August 8th. It's the 10 days into a new regime. Deep breaths, move forward, deep breath, move forward. Anyway, this is a baseline for where they're starting. And that's to say, like, was it pretty out there for them today? No. In some ways, there were a couple things that were pretty good and some things that really just stood out in the way that you didn't want them to. So anyway, but like I said, I say that to say that I think there was a reality check, and I think it just highlights what they still need to get to. Like, this was not a roster that was brimming with just all this awesome talent and saying like they could go win 11 games this year. I think what this shows you is that there's still a building process going on. There are questions about the O-line, about cornerback. Those are still there. And until they're answered, then there's going to put a definite cap on this ceiling, or on the ceiling on the season. But I would still go back to, and I've always done this, you separate what they're building now versus what they can get to in the future. And I think what they can get to in the future is still really good. What they can get to this year, we still have questions that have to be answered in a better way. And again, this is first 9-10 days of practice, step one, another step right now, another step Saturday, next week at Miami. And I kind of like that they're playing these teams. There's two pretty good teams. The Jets have a really good defense. Aaron Rodgers did not practice today, so you can't sit there and talk about the offense except for one guy in particular, which I'll get to in a minute. Anyway, I do think like I said, I think it was kind of a reality check with a couple positions, cornerback, and then O-line depth. And I say depth because you did not have Sam Cosmi was what did some stuff, but during team was not really out there. And then Andrew Wiley did not go, and Brandon Coleman did not go. So that's likely 3/5 of your starting offensive line. They were putting guys out there that just kind of, Mason Brooks at tackle, Braden Daniels at tackle, Chris Paul at tackle. It's not an ideal situation for this group, because I think it highlights that they still need to build that depth. And until you get there, like, they need to build a really good line first, but you still need to get that depth. I think there's some areas, like, I think Michael Dieter will be a good backup center and possible guard. I think there are a couple of guys that are intriguing in there, but I think that's you still got to build some stuff there. So I think the other thing that I think was highlighted today, that Garrett Wilson is a different playmaker, and for the Jets, the receiver, different playmaker. And I don't think that Washington has a guy like him. And, I watched the guy at Ohio State. He was phenomenal there, and he's really good here. And so you certainly had some success against Emmanuel Forbes today. Now, is that horrible on Forbes then? Well, Garrett Wilson is really, really good. And so let's start there. But I will also say the problems where some of the issues for Forbes came from wasn't so much that it was Garrett Wilson, it's because of how you played the coverage, right? And so, like, for example, there were a couple times he got beat on some deep balls. Now, I will say that the joint practice last year against the Ravens, I felt like highlighted some issues with Forbes there as well. He got beat on some double moves. He was getting beat on those double moves consistently against Odell Beckham, and I think it was Zay Flowers as well. Today, it was not double moves, but it was just a really good route by Garrett Wilson on a couple of them. And then just, I think, areas where you'd like to see Forbes be better, that you can be better, but he wasn't. And so, like, can he get there? And he did have an interception in the 7-on-7, so that was good. I will say this, I'm going to paint you a picture of the setup so you can understand maybe what we were seeing. And so, if we were standing up for the first part of practice up in this balcony area up top, where you could see there's a field to my, like, kind of right in front of us, field off to the left, and a field off to the far left. Well, the far left is where the defense was mostly working. So it was really hard to see a lot of them at times. Had good shots of the offense, which was in field number 2, which is kind of to our left. So, and then it was pouring rain as well. And at times it got pretty hard. The rain stopped almost exactly when the practice ended, but throughout it was raining pretty hard. And so, my focus was a lot on offense, but defensively you could kind of pick things up, and then you could go back, and maybe some people in the Jets, some Jets fans were in the stands tweeting out some of these videos. So that helped as well. So shout out to you, to those people who were doing that. And then you could see some things as well. So it was a combination of things. So it wasn't like I saw everything that Emmanuel Forbes did. I did see a couple plays that jumped out. There was one good play in particular where, on a slant route by Garrett Wilson, Forbes was physical and sticks his hands there, knocks the ball away. Good tight coverage, good job. But there were a couple of deep ones as well. And one of the deep ones where it was concerning is the balance that he didn't show on the play. And so it's almost like even at the line, the way his body was almost leaning back. And so then when Garrett Wilson takes him inside, he kind of stands up a little bit more, compensating. And by doing so, I felt like he just lost his balance and didn't have the recovery speed. Wilson beats him down the field. And then there was another time in the red zone where, again, he's up in press, not jamming, but in press coverage. And Wilson just uses quick feet, and Forbes gets, in that situation, he jumps inside a little bit or gets caught leaning inside a little bit. Wilson just gets to the outside, an easy pitch and catch. And then there was another time where it was a zone coverage. It was a third down play, and, he's playing off. There's just too much, it appears on first glance, too much cushion, and just an easy pitch and catch. And then because of the cushion, Wilson is able to run after the play. Now, there was another time Wilson got Benjamin St-Juste. He was running a slot fade, and St-Juste went to jam him, does not get him, and then gets kind of off balance himself. An easy pitch and catch to an out. And I think it was a fade. It turned into an out, and just, Tyrod Taylor with the completion. So Wilson had a really good day. Like I said, he's arguably the best player out there today because of what he could do. And that's just kind of the kind of receiver he is. So they need to see the other question you have about the corners, are they going to be physical enough for this defensive staff? St. Juste and Forbes. Now, I know what the depth chart said the other day, by the way, but Forbes and St. Juste were the first corners out there, which is how it's been all summer. We'll see what Mike Davis, how does he come along here and what they think of him. And so Noah Benigeni, he had a couple nice jobs and some tight coverage. Could they play him on the outside at all as well? So anyways, so that's what was going on with there. But I think that's a question that has to be answered. And next week, you're going to see him against Miami. Tyreek Hill and Waddle. I mean, those are some good dudes down there too. So they're going to be really challenged. And let's see. But I think for Forbes, that technique, that's when you talk about technique and all that, that's what has to get cleaned up. It's, here's the other thing, as someone else was talking about today too, if he's not intercepting the ball, that's his quote unquote superpower. If he's not doing that, what's he doing? So he's got to be able to make plays. And if he's not, then how much is he going to be a big factor? So he's got the length, he can recover well at times, but you got to do better staying balanced and all that. And it's funny because I think I talked about that in the spring when Fred Smoot was on the sidelines with me, just watching him in a stance, and he did not like the stance. So I think that's just something to watch, and we'll see, but not, Garrett Wilson is really good. The other part is the O-line. So I told you Wiley was out there in pads, not practice. Brendan Coleman was not in pads, and not sure what's going on with him. So I'm not going to speculate. They're being very vague about injuries right now because they don't have to tell us anything. So they're not going to say anything. And all I know is he wasn't out there. And right now he has been working as our starting left tackle. And then again, Cosme just coming back from an illness, did go through some stuff, but when it got to 11-11, Michael Dieter was in there at right guard. So that left some funky lineups. Mason Brooks at left tackle. That's not where he's going to be best, right? He, to me, is still better inside. You had Trent Scott at right tackle. He struggles there. You had, at times, Braden Daniels at tackle. You had Chris Paul at tackle at times. And you may have seen a clip of Paul in a one-on-one setting against, it was one rep. So I don't know how else he looked in all those, but it was one rep where he just gets beat, just again, off balance, and not able to recover with his feet. That's one thing that he had some trouble with last year as well. He's good power forward, going forward, but the footwork and all that, that's why it might be tough for him as a tackle. Their new guy, Armani Taylor, who's a tackle who was just signed, did get a couple reps. Don't have a big opinion. And now his name is Alex Taylor, but he goes by Armani. So anyways, just as an FYI. You had Cornelius Lucas in an 11-on-11 situation, gets beat on the outside. It would have been a strip sack of Jaden Daniels. I mean, it was quick, but that happens. Lucas is, he's a good swing tackle who can start for you. He's going to get beat sometimes. That's what happens. That's going to happen. But in this particular play, I think it would have been a strip sack, and that's where you're going to have to avoid those as well. So they've got some questions and some cleaning up to do inside. It's funny because you talk to the linemen afterwards, Nick Allegretti, all those, and Tyler Biadasz, they're pretty even keeled about it, as you would expect. It's August 8th. Guys don't panic on August 8th. Fans and media might panic. Players don't panic. But what I do know is that when you're working together as a new line, what do they always tell you? You need time together. You need reps together, reps together, reps together. That's my concern, is they're not getting those, because now, Wiley's been out for a little while now. He had told me earlier in the week he thought he'd be fine by the end of the week. Clearly, that's not the case. He is doing work. He's just not in the 11-on-11s. But you need that to build that cohesion. You've got to work as a group together, and that's what they're missing right now. Now there's a lot of communication going on, and they can say they can talk in meetings, can do this. But even when I was talking to Allegretti, he's like, there were things that he and Tyler Biadasz had to go through in order to then clean some things up. Well, if you're not getting those reps with someone else, you can talk all you want, but you got to get those reps together. And that's where, so it's not with the starters to me, it's as much the chemistry and the cohesion more than it is the absolute talent. Because if you can get the other, you can build a good line, or at least you can build a line that's good enough. But if you're not getting them, and for example, how to handle games, how to handle stunts, you need to go through those together. It can't just be in the classroom talking about things. It's got to be on the field, seeing it. And if you're not, how do you build that and speed that development? That's my concern. And then the depth of the line, I think that remains to be seen because they've been moving guys all over the place to see, and you're moving them some cases because the guys are out. That's hard too. So I just think there's so much more to learn there, so much more that they've got to show before you can sit there and say, okay, this is where they can get to. And again, I think this is such a multi-tiered process for them. How are they going to look now, next week, the week after, in the final preseason game, or just getting ready for the season? What are they going to look like in the middle of the season? How are they going to look at the end? And they should be a much better team, a much different team at the end of the season than they look right now. And they should be a much different team in a month. I mean, we have a month to go before that first regular season game. So, but that is my concern with there, is building that cohesion and making sure. And again, Brandon Coleman is a rookie. He needs all the reps he can get because he's a rookie. And then you need those reps next to a veteran guy like Allegretti, who is also, he has started games in this league. He has played in this league. It's his first time with a new team, and also he's the definite full-time starter. So there's a lot that they have to build there. That's where I have the concern. And then again, do they have good enough depth? Well, we've got to see that.
For the entire month of August, the Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is offering multiple ways to save on climbing and zip lining, and 50% off axe throwing. There are only a few Sundays left without football, so it's time to get that last summer adventure on the schedule. There's no better place to spend the last few days and nights of the summer with friends and family. Don't just take our word for it. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring was named the #1 aerial adventure park in North America by USA Today. Anytime you're thinking about reaching new heights, make sure you know before you go. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is the only ACCT accredited park in Maryland or Virginia. So there you have it, folks. For the rest of the summer, you can get the best climbing, zip lining, and axe throwing in the country, up to 50% off right here in the DMV. Reserve your adventure today at www.theadventurepark.com/Keim.
Other thing is place kickers. Not a great day for kicking, but they're going to play games in the rain, and you get paid to do well in all kinds of weather. So Ahmed missed they kicked 5 times. He missed his last 3 kicks. All from our vantage point, it's hard to tell where they're at, but I'm going to say they're each from beyond the 40-yard line. And then Riley Patterson he makes his first 3 kicks, and then his 2 misses were from, I think, the 45 and beyond. So that's where you kind of wonder where that's going. But I also know, like, there are going to be some other guys released at the end of camp or at the end of, end of August or whatever, that could be available to them as well. So I think their choices will be evolving, and whether or not Patterson, I would favor Patterson just because he has experience. But if it's not him, if it's not Ahmed, then there's going to be some guys who are cut, because there's some teams that have 2 kickers where they're not going to keep 2 kickers. So they'll have another option at some point, but you'd like to see a little bit better for sure. In the 7-on-7s, so in the first, people ask about the receiving core. Well, the first 3 receivers consistently have been obviously McLaurin, Dotson, and then Dyami Brown. So Dyami Brown, coaches don't give up on speed. Like, that's why I've said that about Brown. I'll say that about a guy like Jamin Davis too. Coaches are reluctant to give up 2 things, size and speed. Davis has both, and they're trying him at a new spot. I don't think they're going to give up on him too soon. Brown has speed. They want to throw the ball deep. I think you're going to give him some looks. And today he did a really nice job. Gets a deep ball from Jaden Daniels. Now, there was a little bit of hand fighting going on down there, because I saw the D-back grab his jersey, and then I see Dyami Brown kind of looks like maybe does he push off after the jersey is grabbed. But regardless, makes a really good one-handed catch down the field. Really nice play. We also saw a couple nice deep balls to Bryson Tremaine. That guy keeps showing up. And again, he can play special teams. 2 deep balls today, both from Mariota, has done a nice job with them. One of which was a nice twisting catch, so he has to adjust to the ball in the air. So that Tremaine keeps showing up. And now what level he gets to, I don't know. We're still looking at a guy, realistically, when you look at the receiver roster, as like a 6th or 7th type guy. But he's showing he can do it in practice, and did it today in the joint practice. And then the key for him will be, what kind of special teams contributor are you? And they did work a lot on the kickoffs today. Hard to tell really what was going on, because it's on the far field for us, but there was a lot of that going on too. So again, in the 7-on-7s, didn't see Jaden Daniels challenge Sauce Gardner. but I did see McLaurin went up, and McLaurin only went up against Gardner a couple of times. I saw him one time, the first time, runs a slant route. Doesn't look like he's open, but the throw was to the other side to Jahan Dotson on an out, a little comeback and an out, and a nice ball by Daniels. Good route by Dotson to come back for that ball as well. So, yeah, that was the one. Going back to the D, let's go to the D for a second. So the one thing that did stand out, because you look down there now, it's funny because when you're watching these practices, when we're at, you hear a lot of roars from the crowd, right? Because like, oh, another big play. And then you see sometimes where there's plays where the play continues, but the quarterback would have been sacked. And I think that happened certainly several times. I did see one situation where I think it was Cleveland Farrell. Dorrance Armstrong had some pressures. Cleveland Farrell had a pressure. Frankie Louvu looked like he had at least a couple pressures. And sometimes the play continues, but you're watching like, well, that play would have been over. And then I know Mike Samerstill had a big pop, I think, along with Quan Martin on a running back at one point. So it wasn't like it was a disaster for the defense. I think there were some good parts there, but they also weren't facing Aaron Rodgers. So you have to take everything into consideration. But I think the one thing that they would look at is the pressure that they felt like they were able to apply. Because whether Rodgers in there or Tyrod Taylor, whomever, if you're applying pressure, you're applying pressure. And so that part was, I think, a good thing. But the corners have got to be better, and we'll see if they get there. Going back to Jayden Daniels, I think, it's funny because this is just another step. It wasn't like he had this awesome day and you're just like, oh my God, here it comes. I don't think we're at that point yet with him. I think there's been a lot of good developments with him, a lot of good steps along the way, and everything. Again, to me, the big key is everything you hear behind the scenes, because that eventually pushes things to the front. And as far as unlocking his talent and doing all that. So I think all those remain very good. Now the throws today, like, he had a couple of good throws in some of the one-on-ones, 7-on-7s. In the full team work, it's not like, I think at one drive, I think he was 0 for 4. One drive, I think it was 3 for 4, 4 for 7, something like that. But there was one drive 0 for 4. So it wasn't like it was just this awesome, great day. It wasn't a horrible day. It was just a day. And it's a learning curve, folks. And the one thing that this team is going to look at with him is what kind of decisions was he making? Was he putting the ball in jeopardy? And so there were a couple of throws where he made some really good. There was one throw to Zach Ertz that in traffic, but he gets to him, puts it where Ertz can get it, trusts Ertz to go up and get it. Ertz goes up and get it. Now the problem on the play, Chris Paul was flagged for a false start, so the play wouldn't have counted. But you kind of put that aside and say, how does it play out? And then as it played out, he makes a throw that Ertz goes up and gets. And there was another throw that maybe you've seen this one, a throw that Sauce Gardner tips away. Now, Gardner kind of trash talked him a little bit, but Gardner said he went up to him and said, man, you're going to be really good. But on this one, and I think he said Daniels told him on this play, I get it over any corner but you, because Gardner's long, he's got that reach. However, on the play, so Terry runs from the seam, running kind of an out, deep out, and Gardner releases his guy up front and just starts to sink. And it wasn't what he's supposed to do, but he does it. However, the tip, I think, doesn't prevent the catch. I think it prevents an interception. So I think that's one where I don't know that I'm sure that he would want to have made that throw. Didn't look like he was late on that, but something was off, because when McLaurin wasn't going to be open, the receiver, the coverage was there. He was a little bit behind him, but he was going to break in front and probably get that ball if Gardner doesn't tip it. So that's one where it's like, was that the best one? Maybe not. But there, as McLaurin told us afterwards, there are plays that Dan is going to want back. I think the good thing for him is just going against another team, going against another defense. It's all part of the learning process. And he's a guy who goes back and studies, goes back and does all those things. That's really good. So that's like, you can look at this a couple ways. You can look at it as like, oh my God, but you have to look at it like, what do you learn from this? Then how do you improve? Because this is not a game where neither team is going to game plan for this stuff. They're putting guys in one-on-one situations. As Quinn said, they would match up like, okay, they want to see this guy in this situation. So they put him in there and see what he does. But for Daniels, there wasn't anything where you say, oh no, nothing like that at all. It was, and he did have, he had a deep out to McLaurin that looked pretty good. Did have one on a screen to Austin Eckler that was behind him, looked a little bit rushed. So not the best throw, but there you go. And again, I told you about the ball to Ertz. They did some 2-minute work in situations. That was when that play came. Decision making again overall seemed to be good, and that's the number one thing they wanted to see. Baby steps here. There were a couple of times one time I saw him kind of slide in the pocket a little bit to the right and just get it over the middle to Brian Robinson and a check down. Good decision. So I think that's pretty good. I think with Mariota, there were a couple of things. Then Cole Turner there was one ball that was a little bit behind him that probably could have caught, but it was behind him. And then another time where he gets kind of blown up on a screen pass where he's supposed to block. Like, that's one thing I wonder about with Turner is again, physical. I'm going to use that word a lot because this is what they use a lot. If you want a physical team, you don't take guys and try and make them physical. You get physical players. And I don't know that that's his game. So can he help them as a receiving tight end? It's going to be the key, because as a physical guy, he's, that's something that is still, you haven't seen that. So anyways, just wanted to point that out.
Hey, it's Bram Weinstein here, voice of the Commanders, and of course, frequent guest of this podcast, the John Keim Report. I wanted to let you all know that my show, which airs at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on ESPN 630, is now exclusively produced by Empire Media, my company, and is going to be distributed through our network. So I'm asking you, please, if you subscribe to this show and love this show, give mine a try as well. Subscribe to the Bram Weinstein Show wherever you get your podcasts, and many of the shows and many of the elements that are in the show will be available on the Empire Media YouTube channel. We're going to talk a ton of Commanders and other DC sports. Check it out.
Couple more minutes and I'm going to get to all your questions, and here we go. So I think one of the things McLaurin said about Daniels, he felt like he did a good job processing, getting the ball out of his hands. That's one thing he liked. He said that, asked some of the linemen about what did you learn about Daniels? And I think they feel like he's been consistent in not getting him in and out of the huddle. The mechanics of the position is a good feel. And as McLaurin said, a lot of guys touch the ball. So that's something that they like to point out, because it's, you're seeing the field, you're moving the ball around. So I think that's always a good thing too. And then as the receiver said, when there's a chance to push the ball down the field, they were doing that. That is a major emphasis this year, and that's the right guy to do it. And I think you have the right guy with McLaurin, Dotson, and then I think with Diami, and then with Daniels, the mindset, because the mindset has to be there for the quarterbacks. I think there were times they felt like Howell last year did not push it down the field like they hoped he would. There were times in the past, even when Kirk Cousins was here, they'd have to tell him, you got to get the ball down the field. Deshaun Jackson might look like he's not open. You got to give him the shot. And the same thing's going to be true with McLaurin. So, yeah. And then Dotson talked about stretching the field. And, it's funny because we asked him about the rain. He goes, he was prepared and ready for the rain. And JP asked him, what does that mean? He goes, he was prepared because they told me about the rain. He goes, but I was ready. He goes, as far as ready, I was ready to go inside because it was pouring. It was not fun out there for them. And Nick Allegretti told us that, again, I go back to the line stuff and handling the games and stunts. That's a very big key. I think the one thing he liked about Daniels is that he was excited out there, and they like the enthusiasm that he shows. It's genuine. The young man likes to play football. And it's funny, it sounds basic, but it matters. And it matters to these guys, and they feel it, and it's contagious. And there you go. So that's the practice report from there. Let's get to whatever you guys want to know. Let's see. I'm going to try and get some questions. I see a lot of comments about the draft picks. And I mean, listen, the draft picks were not good. And I think, the funny thing is, even at the corner position with Forbes, the one thing that I would also say, like last year for the Forbes pick. So Forbes was going to go either late first or go in the first round or early in the second. So there's some notion some people are like, he would have been the guy would have been a high pick regardless. But the thing is, I know looking back on that, there's a couple of things. One, kind of toward the end of the year, you started to hear people kind of back away from some things that had been said about him as far as before the draft or right after the draft. In other words, distancing themselves from the pick. I heard from a few people. That's one thing. But also, I know that one thing that separated him from like a guy like Christian Gonzalez was his play then in the SEC. And Gonzalez played one game against Georgia, and it was not good. I mean, it was not good just because he get beat. It was not good because he wasn't playing the run well, wasn't physical, et cetera. But then he went back in the Pac-10 and was really, really good. And he would have fit well. The other guy is Joey Porter. Now, Porter, the feeling was he played really well in just one way, but that way would really help them right now if they had taken him. But, anyways, so that's neither here nor there, but it's something where you have to say it's not looking good for them at that spot. Like we'll see what happens, but yeah. So by the way, and somebody pointed out on Coleman, we don't know what the injury is. So do not look at whatever has been tweeted out there. We don't know what the injury is. They have not told us. I think there's some people who are speculating because he had a shoulder, somebody wrapped his shoulder, but we don't know what it is. So, I would cool your jets on trying to guess what it is. So until we know, we have not been told. And so, we'll see. And so someone like Tim said, Forbes did have some pass breakups against other receivers. Wilson, though, was a different story, very much a different story. And I think you have to separate there. So you have Wilson, who's really, really good. But I also say that Forbes can play it better. You've got to play it a little bit better. And I think, is that just being more relaxed and staying true to your technique, or are you getting a little bit jumpy because it is Garrett Wilson? Well, you're going to have to learn to guard guys like that because you got a few of those in your division. CeeDee Lamb, you got the guys in Philly, you got Neighbors now in the Giants. You're going to guard guys like that every week. So you're going to have to learn to play a lot more patient and relaxed against those kind of guys. I did like some of the physical play with that defense. So I think that front seven did a nice job. And I think there's guys in the secondary who do a good job. So, so I think that'll be something to watch. But I do think, how does Forbes bounce back from that? Because while he did have some of those other PBUs, the big plays he gave up are big plays. And you got to limit those. And it's not because of not knowing the scheme. It's just, it's getting beat. And, so we'll see. By the way, and this is inaccurate, Lou says, I believe we passed up on Garrett Wilson, trade back and drafted Dotson. No, he was gone. So they did not have that chance. Garrett Wilson is really good. I've said that a few times, but it's true. And as Tim said, others got beat. Davis and Igbogeni got burnt in 11-11-2. Other guys did too. But again, this is a guy that it's a position where you have to play a certain way in this defense, and he's got to play better. So while other guys got beat, he's the guy that's going out with that first group right now, and you need to find out about him. That's what this is. It's not about picking on Emmanuel Forbes, but he is a guy who was a first-round pick last year, and he is a guy that could be, if he could develop, there's a lot of questions. What was he going to do in year two? And they're still let's see how he recovers from this. If it's just, it wasn't about, he's not fast enough. His length is not, he doesn't have the length. It was all about, can you play this technique just a little bit better? How can you do that? So can now these coaches then take that and go show him and go work with him? That's the next step for him. So, you can, I don't make, whatever, that's fine. You can make whatever proclamation you want. And Lance wants to know I'm kind of done talking about Forbes, but what did Ron see in Forbes? Again, it was not just him. It was, I would say Marty Herney was pretty big on him. And, I would say that others distanced themselves from him very much today. So I think there's, but again, it's August 8th. It's a joint practice. And why I think these are very valuable, I think they're valuable for what we saw today. You learn about guys, and you get to learn about guys earlier when you don't have these, and you don't play a lot in the stars and preseason. You don't learn as much. So these practices are really good. So now where do you go from here? So, I think that'll be good. That's good to see. So Todd says that Dotson looked great at training camp. He looks good, made some nice catches. So did Terry. I think Dotson has done a nice job. I think the one question for him, I'm curious to see how they use him. Are they using they are using these receivers all over the place? Like McLaurin's running from the slot. That's going to help him. Dotson will move all over as well. And I also wonder how much motion do they use him with? Because I like him a lot in motion to the stacks, to the bunches. And we're not seeing a lot of that, but I think that's something that we'll see as they get going in the season. And then, because if not, how does he get off the line of scrimmage? Because I still think Dotson still has a lot of talent, and can do stuff after the catch. And that's going to be a big part. That has to be a big part of the defense. So all right, Silver Fox said, I did talk about this, but want to know about what I thought about the depth of the O-line after today. I think that's a question. It's definitely a question. And I want to see that again. My big concern is the starters have not worked together enough. And if they always talk about reps, time together, and they're just not getting it because, again, Wiley's been out now. It's however long it's been out. It feels like a week or so. Cosmus missed a few. Coleman now out. So that's not an ideal situation when you're trying to build something going into the season. So I think that will be that's going to be something to watch as we move forward. So. And this is lockdown law. And this is another good point. Not having to pass protect over 600 times should help the offensive line. Well, what I've been saying too is we don't know how the scheme and the play calling is going to impact them. I've covered lines that you look at the talent and say, that's not a very good line. And yet they produced. Why? Because of how they were used. There were lines that the Shanahans had here that I thought did a pretty good job that were not very good individually. But it's how you coach them. It's what you're asking them to do. It's calling plays, setting things up. So all that stuff. We didn't see any of that stuff last year. The line coaching was bad, and then the play calling put them in a bad spot. And then you had a young quarterback who held the ball. It was a perfect storm for what happened last year. That's when you know all that and you go see, well, what do you think is going to happen? Well, exactly what happened is what happened. All right. And then Grimjaw wanted to know, how did Mike Davis and the safeties look? Were they struggling too? I wouldn't say they were struggling. I don't think the safeties have struggled. I like the safety group overall. And by the way, for Derek Forrest did not practice today, but Percy Butler has been working as a third safety. That's been consistent. Mike Davis, I thought I saw one time an issue, but I didn't pay attention to him enough, again, because where our vantage point was, it was really hard. I just happened to see some of the video that some fans posted of Forbes, and I saw one or a couple of the plays because they were on a far field, so it wasn't ideal to get a great shot. And then Sam Ristil, I felt like did a nice job when I watched him. I think he's going to be a good player, so I don't have any doubts about that. And Doug wants to know, do I think Tremaine is competing with Diami as the fourth or fifth receiver? No, I don't. No. And I told you, like, Diami has been their third receiver throughout camp. So, I mean, he's shown more than like Luke McCaffrey has or other guys. So I don't think he's competing. Do not think he's competing for a fourth or fifth spot. Keep in mind, like, when we're seeing Tremaine go, it's not typically against starters, right? So like, that's the step for him is he has earned more looks somewhere else, but we're seeing it, with the twos or whatever. Nice job. And I'm not trying to take away from him, but I'm not ready to say, oh, he's competing for a fourth or fifth, certainly not fourth. I think Zacchaeus is, he's working more and more. I think McCaffrey would be in there too. And then Crowder as a punt returner is in there. That's why I say I think you're looking at back end of the group, but a guy who offers size. And so, like, that, to me, that makes him intriguing, is just that size and the wide catch radius. And, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that he's competing for those, because I just don't think, again, when they start lining him up with some of the starters in practice, then we'll start to see, okay, now they're looking at him in a different way. But right now we haven't really seen that. The first four guys or so are pretty much, pretty much what we've seen so far. And again, the deep speed that Brown offers is always going to be a thing. So, and Silver Fox wants to know, how did Frankie Louvu look? Again, I wasn't watching him all the time. When I looked up, I did see a couple pressures, and I saw a lot of times he was getting having his helmet slapped by teammates. So that's always a good sign. Like, that guy's looked good in camp. I don't worry about him at all. I think we know what he can do for sure. So but I think he's going to be good. Then Tyler Jones wants to know, Dante Fowler's listed as a 4-3 OLB on the depth chart. Mostly been showing 3 or 4 man fronts. Was Fowler actually playing off ball? They kind of line up as an edge, and you're either in a 2-point or you're standing up. So it's not a true outside linebacker. I think it's just more of a way to kind of just, they do, like, Dorrance Armstrong is going to be down. Cleveland Farrell is going to be down. Fowler, Davis, they're a lot of times lining up in a 2-point stance, but in the same spot, just 2-point, sometimes 3-point, however they feel comfortable. So yeah, I noticed that as well. Nate wants to know, did they work kick and punt returns today? They worked a lot of kick returns, and they worked a lot on kickoffs, and you saw a lot of guys cycling through there. It was on the far field, so it was really hard to tell. But the guys who've been returning kicks like Sam Still, Kaz Allen, Davion Davis, those guys. Let's see, Forbes returned some kickoffs. Eckler returned kickoffs. Noah Igbegeni, Diami, or no, not Diami. There's Sam. Actually, definitely Sam Still. I don't think Diami did, but they were all wearing red in practice. Both those guys are 2s, so one's in white, one's in red. But anyway, Sam Still's been doing that. And then Zacchaeus has been doing that as well. So those are the guys that are working back there. I'll be curious to see if that's something I want to watch Saturday afternoon to see what happens there. So let's see if we can get one more here. All right, so Grimjaw wants to know, any receivers popped today? I know it was a poor day overall due to the offensive line, but anything in McCaffrey, Sinnott, or Tremaine? I talked about Tremaine more than a few times. So Sinnott, I think I saw him have 1 catch. I saw some physical play by him. That's going to be a good thing. McCaffrey I didn't focus in on him a lot, but I didn't see him jump out either. So I'll just say that. Anyways, folks, 40 minutes gave you a lot of time. I'm going to have to wrap it up because I got to hit the road. I'm going to go back to Virginia. I'll be watching the game from my house on Saturday and doing a show after, just regular podcast after the show. And by the way, someone else pointed out too, Tim did here before I close out, that Tinsley also had a nice catch. Well, I like Tinsley. But I think he and Tremaine are very interesting. So it wouldn't shock me if one of those guys makes the roster. So anyways, again, after the game, I'll be back. I'm hoping to be back with another podcast on Friday, hoping to have a guest on, hopefully Nikki Jabal. I said I was going to have her on the other day. Some issues popped up where prevented that. Anyway, hopefully doing that, but hope you enjoyed this. And you gold members, again, Friday at 6:00, look for the link. And join me there with your questions. We can go into this a little bit deeper if you like. So, and for everybody else, thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate the interest. I'll talk to you next time.